Hey everyone, today we're going to begin maple sugaring, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Today we're only going to be tapping 3 trees with these 5-gallon buckets. The other ones are just to save the sap that we get as we slowly pour it into a pot to boil it off. So each one on the tree is going to have its own cover, and we're going to drill a hole through the top of it to send the line through. I got the tools I'll be needing for this job: a hand drill, a hammer. These actually won't be needed until we remove everything at the end. 2 different sized drill bits. One of them for the hose to get through the bucket lid. Another one to drill into the tree. We're going to pound this into the tree, this part. And keep in mind, this part here costs $3 at the Home Depot. You're going to end up paying $9 for a plastic one if you try to buy one of these kits off of Amazon. Do not buy these plastic kits. Yes, they work fine year 1, but if you want to reuse them, good luck getting that out of the tree without breaking it off inside the tree. That's what the linesmen are for, to pull this thing out of the tree when we're all set. And just buy tubing in a store. It's so much cheaper. Look at this. We're going to place the bucket on the ground next to the tree and send the line down to it rather than hanging the bucket on the tree. It's a lot simpler, plus you can use massive buckets for it. We're going to be using some of the healthiest trees on the property today. Before we start this, I'm going to rinse out each bucket and all the parts to make sure there's no contaminants on them. Now, I have one gigantic tree in the middle of the yard we're going to tap. That is going to produce a lot of sap because it's the middle of the yard. It's really spread out. It absorbs a lot of sunshine. It's all the nutrients to itself. You'll get a lot. But if you walk into the woods like this, these more scraggly maple trees will do just fine. You just won't get as much compared to if they were all by themselves. So I believe we're going to tap one of them out here. The best place to tap a tree is right below a joint. If there was a big branch right here, you tap right below it because there's a lot going to the large branch. These trees don't have that. I'm going to look for ones that do have that. Walking back here further into the forest. This one might actually be a good candidate. See this large maple tree? You'd put it right in underneath there. This tree is a way better example. Like right here where it splits off. If you tap right below where it splits off, that would probably be the best part to tap. Now this tree is big enough to tap. Do not tap a tree that's under 6 inches in diameter. You may hurt the tree and you won't get a lot out of it. Now this is probably the most healthy tree on the property, the one I was talking about. It's got a lot of open space to itself, and this one I believe will get a lot out of. These bigger trees, you can actually tap multiple times around them. Just want to leave a good 6 or 8 inches between each tap. We're going to tap right below this large branch. I believe we'll get a lot out of it. Today my goal is only to make about 1 gallon of finished maple syrup. It's a 40-to-1 ratio. If you get 40 gallons of sap, you'll boil that down to about 1 gallon of syrup. If you let it go too far in the cooking process, it'll turn into a molasses or even a very delicious candy before it burns. Which, yes, that's really good. You can scrape that out of the pot afterwards. And maple syrup lasts indefinitely if you put it in a glass container afterwards. Once you open it, it will expire, but that's only because mold can grow in it. It doesn't actually expire itself. Don't use plastic containers unless you plan on consuming it pretty quickly. All right, guys, first up, I'm going to put the smaller drill bit into the drill, and I'm going to drill a hole slightly upwards so that it can drain out and not freeze up. Not too deep. And look at that. We already got syrup coming out. Drip, 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 drip. Great. Now I'm going to take the small metal piece. We're going to go ahead and pound that into the tree. Don't pound it in too tight. You want to be able to get it out. Now you can see consistent drips are now coming out of the tree. I'm going to go ahead and take the tubing, push the tubing over the connector, nice and tight. You can already see drips coming down in here. And now, that's about as much as we need. Go ahead, take the linesman, cut it off. Now I'm going to get the bigger drill bit, put it into the chuck, drill a hole in the cover. Now this does not have to be airtight. You want some air to be able to get out of it. But you want the cover so contaminants doesn't get in there, or at least very little. Remember, this is going to be boiled. Anything that's in it bad is going to die. But you don't want rainwater or snow getting in because it's going to take longer to boil that stuff out. Now that I drilled a nice hole, quickly get rid of the burrs on the inside and outside. Put it down next to the tree. Put the cover on. Not going to put it on very tight because I'm going to be able to get it off. That's just to keep dirt and stuff from getting in. I'm going to go ahead and take my hose. Look how much sap is already in it. Good amount of drips already in the line. Yep, we're going to put that in through the hole. That's a very tight hole. Okay, right now you can literally see a solid trickle, not even drips. You see that inside the pipe? There's a solid trickle coming out. And if we go down and listen inside the bucket, you can hear dripping. The tree is leaking a little bit right there, but that's from the outer part of the bark. Can't really do anything about that. As long as the majority is going into the bucket, we're fine. All right, guys, the hole I just drilled, not leaking at all. That's because it was cold yesterday. This tree is in the shade. We just gotta wait for this tree to hit sun or for it to be slightly warmer tomorrow and it'll start dripping. Hey, I'm not the only one tapping a tree today. But this guy's tapping it more for the grubs and ants. All right, guys, now I'm going to show you a close-up of what I'm actually doing. See, I'm going to go in for the first couple seconds straight to make my pilot hole. Then I'm going to put it at a small angle and go up the rest of the way. This is not the sharpest drill, so I'm putting a lot of pressure on the back of it. Pull out a bunch. That's a good depth. Just making sure the hole's clean right now. That's what I'm doing. This one's not dripping either. That's because it's in the shade. And unless the sun's hitting it, you're not going to get a good amount. My spigot in. Give it some taps. Make it nice and tight. And now in the spring with my linesman, I can grab that and yank it out. I'm going to go ahead and put my hose on there. Push it on nice and snug. And now I'm going to measure out my line down to the ground and put a bucket. I don't close it all the way. I just snug it a bit. So that contaminants can't get in. Now I got to go swap out my drill bit with a bigger one. Because that other one's the diameter of the inside of the hose. This is the diameter of the outside of the hose. Just like before, I just like putting it through the sticker. Yep, see how fast that goes through the plastic? Actually got to take it back off. All right, everyone. Now we have this equipment here from a job we did 3 years ago. I have never used any of it. I know these pots and pans have to be cleaned, but I think they'll be perfect for boiling down syrup. That right there appears to be a 10-gallon pot. And I'm thinking I might be able to use that large mixing bowl for something. That thing is very dirty. That pot, I have to go clean it first. Shouldn't take too long to scrub that thing out. And then down below we have a beautiful propane burner that I got from a salvage job. I don't know if it works. We're gonna test it out right now. And guess what? A couple years ago, a can of propane like this you get for $40-something. This is now $88 to get a new can. Surprisingly, the propane refills have barely gone up at all, but I needed a second can. So what do you guys think? Is this burner gonna work? Haven't tested it yet. If you go down and touch this burner, it's built like a tank. New burners are made out of thin metal that goes and rusts through. This thing, it's got to be at least 1/4-inch steel. Opening that. The regulator works, it's not leaking. Oh, hear that? Wow, it works. Turn it up. Oh wow, this is gonna be great. I don't know if you can see how big that flame is, but that thing is producing so much heat. Awesome. Glad it works. Thing looks really heavy duty. All right, guys, we're actually gonna add multiple taps on a few of these trees that are producing a lot. And I'd recommend going over 6 or so inches and up 6 or so inches. So about right here, we're gonna put another tap into the tree. I'm actually gonna go right here. This looks like a better spot to me, personally. Now everybody, I really wanted to get brass tees, but they didn't have them. So this is a 1/2-inch tee. That hose fits snugly inside. It'll work fine. There's no pressure on it. That took way longer to do than it should have. Quality control is really bad on these plastic tees because all 3 sides are supposed to be the same. But I'm realizing on every single one, each one is slightly bigger and slightly smaller. For this application, I would recommend just putting 2 hoses. Hose is cheap. These are expensive. I learned this is how I'm going to do it until they actually get the good brass ones in. All right, now we're gonna let those soak overnight. The chicken wire's only in case some animal trying to get a drink falls into it. All right, everyone, we're now into April. It's been a few weeks. Here in Maine, it got really cold again. We got another snowstorm of almost a foot. Multiple days, it doesn't get near freezing. So that really slowed down our production. After 2 weeks, we're finally getting some warm weather, and hopefully these trees will start producing. So far, I've collected about 8 gallons. And that's probably about a week ago, last time it was warm. It's been frozen solid, so the stuff is still fresh. Now we have to go dip all these buckets in warm water, free them up, and we're going to start boiling them down today. Here's what we're starting off with. A lot of frost in there. All the buckets are frozen solid. I'm going to spray the outsides of all these buckets with hot water, and we'll start boiling it. Well, it's a good thing these trees didn't produce more, because I had to go down to a smaller pot. This big pot right here, which I mentioned I got from a salvage job like 2 or more years ago. First time ever using it. See where it's kind of corroded? It leaks there. I just told you that pot was leaking. It leaked down inside the burner, and look at that, we got syrup in there. It smells really good as it's burning. The level has barely gone down. It's been about 1 hour. But if you stick your head over it, it smells very sweet as it starts to boil down. I'll be lucky if I can fill 2 or 3 of these with this amount of sap once it boils down. Whoa, we gotta turn this down a little bit before it boils over. Boiling down. It smells so good down inside this pot. Let's grab some of that foam. Tastes pretty sweet. It's starting to darken up. Alright, this happens sometimes. This propane tank, the bottom of it's starting to freeze. If you take propane really fast from any tank, it'll start to freeze up. So, just gotta... That worked nicely. I fill that up with nice warm water, that pot. That'll help it burn out completely before we put another tank on. Since this morning, My trees have already produced another 2.5 gallons. So in the next few days, I'll be doing another boil down just like this. Look down there how dark that is. The darker the syrup, usually the more tasty it is. Lighter syrups are just done earlier in the year. But as soon as it starts to get warmer, the trees will start producing darker and darker. You don't really notice this until you start to boil it down. The sap is clear regardless. You gotta wait for what's in there to boil down about half. We started off with about 5 gallons of sap today. And when we boil that down, we should have 16 ounces, enough to fill 2 of these, because 5 gallons divided by 40 is 16 ounces. Alright, in the final hour of boiling down, you want to keep a close eye on it because it can burn. Now, it's going to begin thickening up. Most people want a 1:40 ratio for their syrup. If you choose to, you can make it thicker. If you choose to, you can make it thinner. Even when this whole pot was only half boiled down, you dip your finger in it, it tastes nice and sweet. If you let it slightly overcook, it'll turn into a really sticky caramel. And if you let it go even further, it'll become crystallized and it'll become maple candy. This stuff, if you overcook it a bit, it is so sticky on your teeth. Even when I'm done with this and I pour it into the jars, definitely going to go in there with a metal spoon, scrape all the stuff off the edges. Super delicious. Yes, maple candies can be pretty good. It's got the same texture as old honey when it starts to become crystallized. Old honey doesn't go bad. It just becomes crystallized as a bunch of the water begins to leave it. And just like honey, maple syrup does not have a expiration date. It's usually the container that expires. Now, like these cans here, it's only recommended you keep it in that up to 4 years. But I've opened mason jars of people's stuff that's been 60 years old. I've opened professionally canned stuff that's been 70 years old on my other YouTube channel. And I've never had a problem. I've tested for chemicals, lead. None of that stuff has ever been present in it. It's always been super good. Worked out great putting it in warm water. Didn't freeze up at all. There's about 10% left in this. Didn't have to go on to the second tank one bit. We're going on about 8 hours by the time this will be done. I expect this to wrap up in the next half hour. That'll leave us around 8 hours. This is a very powerful burner. More powerful than most of them in a house. I'm not sure if you can tell how fast that's firing, but I love that little burner. Alright, just shut it down. You can see the surface is already starting to thicken up a bit. And the greatest thing about this is, even if you overcooked it slightly, you can add a little bit of water. You can reverse the mistake. Okay, I'm going to let this cool down for a few minutes. Then we're going to put it into 2 mason jars. Now, you want to pour it into the mason jars with a good amount of heat, so it kills any kind of bacteria that could possibly get in through the transfer. But you can't pour it too hot because it'll shatter these things. And I've done it a couple times so far in the past 5 minutes. Layer of film will start to grow across the surface. I just flick it around a few times and it just goes back into it. And this, it thickens up as it cools down. A lot of people will overcook it and wonder why it hardens into a caramel after. Alright, so here I ended up with 4 containers. That's because I didn't boil it as much as most people like it. I left it a little bit more runny. See that? Looks really nice and dark in the containers. You can see it better in what's left in the bottom of the pan. It's not that runny. At least I don't think so.